In this episode of Zack Miller Says, we got George Bryant, and this episode is really about being transparent. George, who is a New York Times bestseller, the man behind the CivilizedCaveman Cooking.com, Paleo Kitchen, and many, many, many other things. He's gone through a lot in his life, and he shares it. He's very transparent about it. We talk about it. We talk about why to be transparent, how to figure out what to share, what not to share. And I met George because I saw someone talking about him on LinkedIn, and I simply said, would love to hear your story on my show. Reached out, made it happen. See, that's why I just say, hey, it's so incredibly powerful. But if you're interested in transparency and how to figure out what to share, what not to, or you're just interested in learning from others who have gone through insanely traumatic things like George has, this is the episode for you. I'm super grateful for George. I love his message. I love his honesty, his authenticity, because it's hard for what he's gone through, and we'll get into that all in this episode. Let's go. You're a big fan of bacon.
I built a company and actually named it Hugs and Bacon. So I would say that I'm a big fan of bacon.
You know what was interesting is we record this via Skype. When I was putting in your Skype, that's your kind of handle, I guess. The world now knows that. Sorry, world. But I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Hugs and Bacon. I like that. So like thick cut, little cut, like what's your bacon of choice?
I would say thick cut, maple pecan smoked wood, because I make my own bacon, and that area, like if I had to say like crispy dark was a 10, and like 1 was like that floppy disgusting buffet type bacon, I'm around like an 8. And so I like the chewy fat, but I love the crispiness when it like melts in your mouth. So I would say like a maple pecan wood smoked bacon, thick cut, cooked to about an 8 is my preference. Not that I'm specific about bacon or anything.
I'm not specific at all. I mean, you had a lot of good stuff there. So one of my favorite questions to ask is, if someone was to introduce you to someone, what would you want them to say that you are? Who is George Bryant?
Yeah, this is an amazing question. So I've done a lot of work around this one. So I would want somebody to say that I am unapologetically authentic, and I use my story and truth to create possibility for other people to step into their greatest potential.
And for those of you who don't know, George has gone through a lot of craziness. We probably won't go into all of it. Things that are just all across the board, emotionally, physically, mentally, everything from rape to seeing suicides to being bullied, a lot of different things. I mean, so many that you just can't even imagine. And I love that you are so unapologetically like into telling people. So were you always like that? Was there an aha moment? Like, because I think a lot of people want to start talking about it, want to be transparent, or need that kind of, I don't even know what the word is, but they need this vehicle. So how did you realize that maybe telling that story was the vehicle that could help you out through some of this?
Totally. That's such a valid question. So no, it hasn't always been like that. I was basically a closet addict and self-punisher, right? I was addicted to being bulimic. I was addicted to binge eating. I was addicted to aggressive, overcompensating behaviors to basically hide in plain sight. And I'm famously known for saying, eventually the poison of my incongruency slowly killed me until the pressure cracked. And really what ended up happening was I was in the Marine Corps for 12 years, and that was my plan. I was going to do 20 years, retire, and hand out smiley face stickers at Walmart. That was my goal for my life, and I figured it was a good plan. And at 12 years, when they said, we're medically separating you for traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, and then almost losing both your legs, they really didn't know where to go. I didn't really know what to do, but I wasn't interested in being bulimic anymore. I'd lost my dad to cancer. I had seen food kind of destroy him and deteriorate his life. And I was like, you know what? Like, I get to be different. Like, I don't like this, but I have so much pain and trauma from my past. I'm using this to like punish myself and collect evidence. And so I was like, I'm going to teach myself how to cook. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to teach myself how to cook, and I'm going to document the whole thing on the internet. I'm going to post it every day on Facebook, and that way I have accountability and nobody knows that I'm being accountable. They just think I'm cooking.
Yeah. What year is this, do you think? Around?
2010. 2010.
Okay.
And so I just started posting it publicly. And I was like, I'm just going to keep posting. And if I post every day, then I know other people are watching me and I won't binge and purge. And through all of that, I taught myself how to cook. I felt absolutely amazing. I got into the best shape of my life eating paleo because I have celiac disease. And hormones started balancing. I had a lot more energy. And I was like, you know what? Like, I can do this. Like, I can actually live this way and not binge and purge. And but in that 2 years of when I started cooking to when I told the world, I had ups and downs. I would relapse back in and I would do everything. But I started to realize that the accountability piece was what was missing for me my whole life. And when I would share parts of it or just me posting online, it would change how I related to it. And so I made the decision one night that I was just going to be done with it. And so I called my buddy, Abel James and Stephanie Ruper, who had two of the biggest podcasts in the world at the time. And I said, I want to tell everybody that I'm bulimic. And they're like, what? You're bulimic? And I was like, yes. And I was like, so I want you to make a deal with me that we're going to record the podcast. And no matter what says, no matter what I say, no matter what I tell you, at the end of it, you'll publish it. And they're like, okay. And so we recorded those podcasts and I was like, don't publish it. I don't want anybody to know. And they published it anyways. And that's how I came out to the world about my first struggle, which was my eating disorder. And, when you have things that hide in the dark parts of our soul, shame, fault, blame, and guilt, we make things up about how they're going to be interpreted. Like what's going to happen if we share it? What are people going to make up about us? And all those things. And I had all those fears. And the most amazing thing happened. I felt like I lost about 8,000 pounds in one moment and I felt free. And the response was nothing short of a miracle. I had over 5,000 emails come in a couple days. Everybody from like 13-year-old kids to 82-year-old men that had struggled with body image and eating disorders and never shared anything. And I basically created permission and safety for them to share their story and start doing their work. And for me, it was massively therapeutic. And so that was the big trigger in my life in 2012 was when I did that I realized that when I owned my story couldn't own me. And so I basically, through the years, have practiced and become like a vessel for radical honesty, or what I say being a heat-seeking missile for what I fear most. And I use conversations like this, like if we were having coffee for the first time or doing interviews or doing videos, to basically take all the ammunition out of my own head that I use to judge myself and make myself wrong, imposter syndrome, not good enough, not smart enough, and basically speak it into existence so it doesn't have any power over me anymore. So that is the easiest summary of why I do it, and basically 12 years wrapped into like one sentence.
How do you know what to share and what not to share? So you knew, I guess in some capacity, being bulimic was something that you had, I guess you said. Were people telling you that over a long period of time? Like, was it just in the back of your head? Because, I think, and I'm a big believer in transparency as well. I tell people the overwhelming majority of things. There are just some things that I don't feel like are necessary, I guess, right? So I don't share a lot of things with my personal life, I guess, with like my wife and stuff like that. I don't think it's necessary. Lately, I'll say those things. But, some people talk about, like money issues, medical issues and things like that. Like, how do you know what you are supposed to share and what not to share? Because it's not that you can't be transparent, but I think there are some things that maybe mean more than others. And so how do you know that, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, that's the thing that you really want to get out there, I guess?
Totally. And that's an amazing question. And this is where the nuances of like who you are and what it means to you come up as a person. So for me, when I have things come up in my life, like things that are stressing me, things that I'm making up about myself, I have a feeling inside of me and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, oh, but I'm not going to run from that one. So I don't need to share it. And then I have a different feeling where like, oh, I'm really like making myself wrong and shameful and bad and wrong in this moment. And I got to get out of my own way. And so for me, it's always a gut feeling. Like I didn't feel like I needed to tell the world or the world needed to know that I was bulimic. I felt like I needed to tell the world that I was bulimic to close that back door. And that led me down a road because I shared that bulimia story, but I didn't share why for another 3 years. And so I shared that I was bulimic, and then I had this 3-year gap of living in that space of the whole world knowing I was bulimic. I went on a book tour, became a New York Times bestselling author, talking about food and eating disorders and all these things. And then I kept feeling incongruent, and I felt like I was teetering on the edge of like going back into the spiral or becoming bulimic again. And it's because I never shared the whole truth. And my wife looked me square in the eye one day, and I was about to give a keynote on the biggest stage in the paleo space. And she's like, so you have two options. You can go out and give the keynote that you're going to give, or you can go out and you can give the keynote that you know you're supposed to give. And I walked out on that stage and I stood there and I started a timer for 60 seconds. And I said, I'm going to share my 60 seconds of truth before I start. And I was like, so a lot of you are here. You know who I am. I wrote a New York Times best-selling book, and you know I was bulimic, but none of you know why. And the reason you know why is because I felt shame to share, and so I'm taking the shame away. So I was sexually abused when I was 9, and once again when I was 13, and it's what started my bulimia. And this is why I've been doing what I've been doing and how I've been hiding. And basically, I just, right before I gave a keynote, and I knew that that had to happen because for me, I felt the urge and all of the evidence I was collecting about myself. I made myself bad and wrong and shamed and faulted and guilted. And it was like this teetering back and forth. Like I felt like I was constantly in this battle of like survival to not be an addict, to not be bulimic, to not be these things. And I felt urged to share that. And when I shared that, my whole life changed. Like my whole entire life changed. The connection to my wife, the connection to my kids, the connection to myself, to my friends, because I'd basically found the last hiding dark spot in my soul, and I shined a flashlight on it. And when the darkness doesn't exist, the shame can't hide. And so I know that's a very long-winded answer to a question, but it's a feeling thing for me. It's always a feeling thing. And I can give a more tangible example. Actually, I volunteer with a company called Defy Ventures, and we go into prisons with amazing human beings, some of them on life sentences, some of them have been in prison for 25, 35 years and incarcerated. And they do an 8-month program to become entrepreneurs in training. And we basically guide them and help them and mentor them in writing personal statements and resumes and starting a business when they get out of prison. And it's a lot of personal development work. And one of the things we work on the entire time is owning their story and letting go of the shame so their story can't own them. And literally from that program, there's been dudes that have come out. One dude started a company called, it was like, he basically started a workout program for women to do like prison workouts. And now he's literally in like Neiman Marcus in New York City teaching women how to do the prison workouts he did because he came out and owned his story. And he's like, this is why I was in, these are the mistakes that I made, this is what I'm doing about it, kind of thing. And so for me, I think it's a personal choice, but I think we know as people, like when we feel like we're disconnecting or secluding ourselves from something and we're punishing ourselves versus when we're like, oh, this is interesting, this is coming up, I'm going to work through this. I don't really need to share this publicly because like I have all the tools I need to move forward. So that's kind of my thought on all of that.
I really appreciate the way that you said that. There's a lot of things that you said that we're going to get to. So the owning of your story, the positioning of that and all that, we're definitely going to get into it. I'm currently reading, it is September 6th of 18. I followed Rich Roll for a long time.
Yep.
I followed his podcast. I've listened to a lot of his stuff. But over the last year, I have been getting back into my fitness world. I basically, for the last 10 years of owning a business, have basically gained 100 pounds and decided not to get into fitness world for whatever reason. This year it started. It wasn't because of a New Year's resolution or anything like that, but I'm working out every day and listening to podcasts. I have like this waterproof iPod, so I can swim laps, I can ride my bike, and I'm not going to worry about losing anything or damaging anything. So I can listen to all these podcasts and books. And so I'm finally reading his book. It's really interesting. I'm in the part of his book now where he's talking about kind of coming out and telling people some of the issues that he's gone through.
Yep.
Did you, when you in 2012, Abel and Stephanie, when you're going through that podcast and you're going through that, did you think that telling people that you were bulimic was going to be that, oh, I'm done, I don't have to do this moment? So even though you were terrified to tell people, you still knew in the back of your mind that you basically weren't telling anyone anything?
Yeah, basically, like I knew in that moment, like it was a stepping stone for me. It was like the first direction, like the first step in me owning my story. And I knew that I felt driven in that moment to never purge or binge eat again or punish myself for it. And that's what I wanted to create space for. But I did know in that moment, like I knew based on the conversation that the sexual abuse wasn't going to come up because I don't even think that I had done and processed like where that had come from or that it was even real kind of thing. And so all I understood was the bulimia was there and that I had these thoughts and these memories that I think triggered them. And so I basically shared to the current level of my understanding of what I thought was in my way. And so I owned that story and I posted it publicly, for me. And I knew that that's why it was so powerful and that I was driven to do it. It's because I realized that that was the one thing holding me back. Like, it was like I'd been this Marine, I'd been deployed, I'm covered in tattoos, I have an 8-pack, and yet I was purging in porta potties in Afghanistan, right? And nobody knew. And so I had made up and wrapped all this stuff around it, like how I'm a bad person and I should have all these shame and like how dare me. And I needed to take that ammunition away. And there was only one way for me to do it. And so that's why I did it. I did it with the intention of sharing the part of the story that I started to understand or thought I understood, which is then what opened up all the possibilities for what came after it for the next 3 years. But that was the first step. And for me, one of the things I've always said is, like, in life, I've learned in my life, in my history, like, there is no destination. Like, all I'm basically doing is collecting experiences and understandings of things so I can elevate my consciousness to choose. Like, human beings don't change. We just elevate our consciousness to choose. And so I've been collecting all of these experiences. So when I'm hit with a situation or stress or money issues or finance issues or weight issues or food issues, that I have stuff to pull from to choose in that moment, like what I do from it. And so for me, the most important part is that I don't give myself back doors. And so when I'm met with resistance or fear or wanting to share the bulimia or wanting to do anything, I don't wait for it to be perfect. I just share what in that moment will get me moving forward and like create that catalyst or step forward in everything. When it's a conversation like this in business meetings, like if people are stuck, I'm like, hey, I think we're stuck because I've been making this whole conversation about my ego and I've been really committed to being right. So can we just clear the table right now and be like, okay, I'm willing to be wrong. Let's move forward. And like, I use it every day in my life to kind of just move and move and move to keep on this forward progress of presence, because, there is no yesterday and there is no tomorrow. Like, those are just memories and illusions and projections that we make up with like what we have. And like, I want to be present with my wife and with my kids and with my friends and on this podcast and with people that message me. And the only way that I can be really, really connected to those people is to share the stuff that's getting in the way of me having that. So that's kind of my thought process behind all of it.
So that podcast was a stepping stone for you to at some point down the line tell the entire story. You use the word, you don't want to backdoor yourself. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so backdoors are something that I talk about a lot. My wife taught me commitment isn't feelings, right? And the way that I equate this to people is like, we get married, we make commitments to the gym, we make commitments to our work, but the first time we get an opportunity to not fulfill it to its depth and level, we take the back door, right? Like, I'm going to go to the gym every day for 7 days at 7 a.m. And then we're like, okay, but it's okay that I get there at 7:10 or tomorrow at 7:30, right? And those are all back doors. And the way I always like to equate it is commitment is the only thing you have. It's the only thing that it's honesty, it's congruency. It's like making a commitment and following through with it so you can keep moving in the direction you want. And so like in marriage, we have a child. My son's 21 months, and she used this example on me a couple times. And she's like, when he's 4 weeks old and he wakes up in the middle of the night and he's bawling his eyes out and he's hungry and he's got a dirty diaper, we don't want to get out of bed. We don't want to get up. We want to sleep. We're exhausted, but we're committed to our son being as safe and healthy as possible. And so regardless of how we feel, we get up, we tend to him, we feed him, we change his diaper, and we put him back to bed to be in that experience. And so that level of commitment is what we try to apply in every aspect of our life. That if you're going to make a commitment, you can't have a back door. You got to burn the ships kind of thing, because if you do create one, you will take it. Like, I'm going to go to the gym 7 days a week, except in this. And it's like, no, there are no exceptions, right? Like, I'm going to be honest all the time, except no exceptions. Like, you're just going to be honest all the time and you're just going to share all the time. So that's the whole commitment isn't feelings kind of no backdoor thing.
I love that. So I've worked out every day this year. It's not to brag anything like that. It's the thing though. That's the back door. So many people, like, I'll be like, oh, I'm going to work out 4 days a week, 3 days off. Right. Yep. And I'm like, you know what? No, I just have to do it. And so it's because my best friend, Tim Ryan, he has ran for like 1,500 straight days, at least 2 miles, as many as 26. And I was like, man, if he can do it, I can do it. And so that hit at the same time I downloaded this app called Productive, and it basically says that I'm tracking this thing every day. And there's been times where I don't want to do things, sure, but I'm like, no, I gotta do it, and I gotta do it. And now I'm like, well, shoot, like let's do it. I just signed up for a half an Ironman. So all these things it's just really interesting how they all kind of fit together. So,
by the way, can I just acknowledge
Yeah.
you for that? Like that is phenomenal, like phenomenal. And I want to just tell everybody, you're going to be listening to this and you're going to hear my story and you're going to Google me and you're going to see me with an 8-pack. I'm still 75 pounds overweight right now. I figured out I have mercury poisoning from metal fillings in my mouth from root canals and dental work that's basically caused heavy metal poisoning. And so I have all the ammunition I want and evidence to punish myself, to get mad at myself, to binge eat, and I don't. I'm just like, this is where I am and this is where I get to be. And I am not working out right now, and I avoid it, and I'm doing the work on that. And like for you, I love that you've made that commitment. Like you've figured out what your back door is. And you're like, if I don't go that one day, it's going to give me ammunition to not go the other days. And so you're like, screw it, I'm closing the back door. And I think that that's so pivotal because that commitment is what changes the results that you create in your life exponentially. And I think in your case, and I'm going to say this to anybody listening, whether it's in fitness or with food or with anything, don't overcommit till you set yourself up to fail, to collect more evidence. If you're going to run every day like your friend, he made it in a way that he knew that no matter what, he couldn't have any excuses and he could get a mile in or a 10-minute workout in or, at least 100 squats a day, because then you basically take all your ammunition away from yourself. No self-sabotaging, no failing, no back doors. And so whether it's in business, whether it's in food, like, hey, I don't want you to change how you eat every day. I just want you to pick one thing and do it differently every single day, whether it's a green smoothie in the morning or a juice or you're fasting or you switch to decaf coffee or you cut the sugar out, like whatever it is in that one thing, so you can start creating those micro commitments and collect that evidence to move forward. And just to whip the curtain back, for me right now, it's actually just standing and moving more. I spend a lot of time on airplanes and in conference rooms. And so now I'm very present that when I'm in meetings, I won't sit down. I stand at the whiteboard. And then when I'm at like the airport, I will walk and not take the escalator or not take the belt. And then when I'm home, I go on at least a 10-minute walk every single day. And so for me, it's just one thing that no matter what I do, won't allow me to get out the back door. And so I just wanted to acknowledge you for that because that is phenomenal. And now you've built on top of it. You went from working out every day, so now I'm going to do a half Ironman, and like you get to basically keep going because you've collected all that momentum and evidence about yourself, which is amazing. So I just wanted to acknowledge you for that.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
So what's interesting is so many people at the beginning of, I don't know, trying to create a new habit, let's just call it that, will give themselves out immediately. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it's like, well, you've already set yourself up for failure. And I started doing that. But then very quickly in that process, within like 2 or 3 days, I thought, oh, I'm not going to take days off. And so I was able to set this other trigger. What's really interesting is I just told you I've been reading a lot of books, really because when I'm working out, I don't want to just listen to music all the time. Like if I could be learning, I could be doing multiple things. So I just finished The Power of Habit. And so there was a part in this book that I thought was really interesting where it's if you can start a really small habit, it will, and have you read this, by the way?
No, I don't. No, keep going.
If you were about to say I don't read,
I don't.
That used to be me, and now I'm just doing it to do it, I guess. But so he says with all this research, if you start a really small habit, it will start other habits too, which is really interesting to me because now I've started these other habits that are actually a lot harder, but are easier because I've started some of these more simple habits. So, all right, moving on. So people early in 2010, it sounds like knew you as the guy who cooks a lot, is creating at some point in there paleo in there, right? Because it wasn't always paleo to start, or was it?
It was all paleo.
It was always paleo. Okay, so always paleo in there.
Yep.
You then write a book and become a New York Times bestseller, The Paleo Kitchen.
Yep.
And everyone knows you for that. And you've built this entire amazing brand around that. But then you throw in, a curveball and be like, well, there's this. So do you think that people know you more now as the paleo guy or this other thing that you threw the curveball in for?
I think it's all the curveball because I tried to, once I basically through that last curveball, I realized that being just paleo and dogmatic about anything was not healthy. And I didn't like how it was excluding people and also excluding myself, right? It was a form of like control that wasn't really supportive. And I was like, why do I care? Like if you're vegan, vegetarian, paleo, or primal, I don't. All I care is that you're making choices that help all of us, win, educating. And I realized that it was a lot deeper than food. So then we rebranded and we went to wellness, recipes, and fitness. So I could start sharing more about this curveball to where, I was like, and I've realized in my life that I use food as a coping mechanism and I'm really creative on how I do it. And so I want to take its ammunition away, right? And I want to be able to practice 3 times a day with healthy meals around having a healthy mindset and setting habits and creating intention and forgiving myself. Because like I say this to everybody, like you don't need another brownie recipe. The 1,000th brownie recipe that you found on the internet is no different than the first one. And I found myself doing it as well, where I was looking for these recipes, but I wasn't the recipes. I was looking for the answer. I was looking for this other person to tell me, like, if you make this, you'll lose the weight, or if you follow this, you'll lose the weight. Rather than realizing that I had everything in front of me in that moment, I just had to choose to use it. And then in order to do that, I had to let go of all the stuff that was stopping me, all the shame and the fault and the blame and the back doors and, all the broken habits and things like that. And so then I realized that like I had a bigger purpose when it came to this. And it wasn't just food. Like food was just a bridge, right? And then wellness and lifestyle and all of that other stuff were just bridges. And underneath all of it is us as human beings, like owning our story and being okay with who we are. Like, this is who I am. I love myself and I'm fully present and I choose to be this person so I can leave a legacy for my kids or have a positive impact. And I basically just started removing all the crap that was getting in the way. And for me, because I'm so good at like survival from a broken past and, a lot of trauma and abuse and manipulation, I had to close all my back doors. And if I'm left to my vices and conversations with people, I can manipulate anybody into anything or thinking a certain way. And the only way out of that is to share publicly when I'm doing it. So I was like, I'm going live every single day on the internet and I'm going to tell everybody that I'm doing this and this is what I'm struggling with and this is how I'm self-sabotaging and this is how I've messed up my marriage and this is how I've done all of these things so I could basically create the space to move forward. And so I think now with me traveling the world as a consultant and a keynote speaker and helping companies ethically scale and then still having Caveman, I think people see me more as the description I gave in the beginning, which is my intention that I'm just unapologetically authentic and I show up in that manner to create permission, safety, and accountability for other people to self-identify and step into their truth and power and accomplish their goals is really like my whole purpose.
Why do you make this so hard for me? Like I'm trying to get so many questions in and I'm like, oh, okay. So I think that's
by the way, I'm just going to say I'm addicted to hearing myself talk. So you're going to have to interrupt me. And like, that's why I created a job where I get to talk all the time. It just becomes my therapy. Yeah. Well, and the reason I do it is I've learned like that there's this level of discomfort that comes with owning my truth. There's this level of discomfort that comes when I share my story. And rather than being addicted to being bulimic or binge eating or drugs and alcohol, I basically became addicted to that feeling because it represents so much growth and potential in my life. It makes my marriage better. It makes my parenting better. It makes my friendships better. And so every opportunity I have to share and make myself sweat and uncomfortable, because I'm sweating right now because it happens every time I do this, I just run towards it as fast as possible because I feel so free and light on the other side of it. So that's why.
Interesting little side note, the half an Ironman that I signed up for, I'm terrified to do it. I know I can do the swim. I know I can do the bike right now. The run is what I'm terrified of.
Yep.
It's in 9 months, but I was talking to a client earlier and I was like, I'm terrified of this. She goes, I've never heard you say anything that scares you. And she's like, it's really interesting. I'm like, yeah, I'm terrified. I will be very prepared for it though. Do you still go live every day?
I don't go live every day. What I did is I made a commitment I was going to go live every day for 6 months and not miss one. And I did. And I ended up going for just under 10 months every single day on my Caveman page. And I talked about everything from I don't want to be live right now because I'm just committed to being right. I'm crying right now because my wife is going to leave me because I'm just being a bad husband. And like, I mean, like this is on a food blog, like on a Facebook page about food. And I just started like ripping off all of the Band-Aids and wounds. I talked about my bulimia, my sexual abuse. And like, honestly, like I had 175,000 fans at the time. So it's not like I was going live to nobody. I was going live to a very scary place. And like, one of those live videos got 5.5 million views. And this was on a food page. And all I talked about was bulimia and sexual abuse. And it had the most views out of anything. And I was like, holy moly, like people really resonate with this, because we all have the thoughts, we all have the feelings, and like we want to be connected to human beings. We want to have these relationships, but they're all built and predicated on all this bullshit and these lenses, crap, that these lenses that we project and put out. And I'm like, when you just rip the curtain back and you're like, this is just who I am, like it creates the most deep, meaningful, grounded connections ever. And so now I just, any opportunity I can, I go live probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 times a week, but on my personal Facebook page and in my marketing stuff, and sometimes on Caveman and sometimes on Instagram. And but I've basically learned how to share those moments of truth or clarity or fears as I have them come up. So I'll do it on Instagram stories, I'll do it in a Facebook post. Like I don't have to use live anymore, but I'm just constantly just owning all of that basically quote unquote crap that clouds the vision, and just getting it out of the way so we can all have something deep and meaningful, and not basically running in the rat wheel of like our society and socioeconomics and our paradigm development, and like you have to look this way and you have to be this is your perfect Instagram life. And I'm like, well, none of it's perfect, peeps. Like none of it.
I love that. So what's interesting is, in a simple form, people are looking for a recipe on how to succeed in life, when really it's just work and be honest, right? Most people aren't willing to change something, even if it's, and I've done this myself, I probably am doing it right now, 8 hours of something a day that you don't want to do. You change that one thing, you get 8 hours back in your day. The recipe is, so many people are looking for this recipe that is right in front of their face. They just don't want to do it. So I appreciate you doing that. So wellness, recipes, fitness. It used to be the old brand. Basically, you figured out it's the new thing.
Yep.
When you wrote the book, like, did you think it had a chance? Like, what kind of brand did you have at that point? Was there a chance that it could do well? Like,
yeah, there was a small chance. So I didn't have, like, my brand existed. It was Civilized Caveman Cooking Creations. This was 2014. So we had 11,000 people on our email list. We probably had like 40,000 fans on Facebook. And but I mean, even in that time, to hit the New York Times, like you were talking about having 10,000 pre-orders of your book, like just to even have a chance. But at the time, I didn't know that I was good at marketing, or that's what my passion was in this world. But I spent 9 months developing a quote unquote marketing plan and a launch plan. And I built the entire thing myself. And I did it all on relationships and podcasts and organic relationships and things like that. And now I talk about it and I get paid a lot of money to teach it to people, but it was the thing that made me a New York Times bestseller. We debuted on the list at number 13 and then ended up hitting number 4 a couple weeks later. So we kept climbing and we stayed on for 22 weeks. And so, the brand at the time was enough to get, I don't know, a couple thousand pre-orders, which was great, but it was all the other work and the relationships that I built in and the story that I shared. I would go on podcasts and talk about, I wrote the book because I wanted to beat my bulimia, and these are simple recipes that you can use to overcome orthorexia or anything that gets in your way or any excuses you have. And like, I didn't know how to cook 2 years ago, so this is really simple. And I basically made it all about my story. And even the book in itself was a story. I taught myself photography to write the book. I taught myself how to write a book to write the book, and the marketing plan and everything to make it what it was. And I think underneath all of it, really, and now, I travel the world, and 99% of my time I'm spent as Batman that nobody knows. I was nicknamed the Oz, behind the curtain of a ton of billion-dollar brands, because I do all their digital marketing strategy. But I travel the world and I speak and I work with companies and I teach them how to do what I call ethical marketing and making a difference and scaling in this kind of world of like business. But underneath all of it, it's the same thing that I found in the food world. It's that there's 3 things that people need to change in their life, and it's permission, safety, and accountability, in that order. And so I've now just applied that principle to everything that I do, whether it's my food brand, whether it's my personal brand, whether it's my consulting, whether I'm helping a company or helping a person. I figure out what are the wickets that are required to help them create that space. And like, the permission is when you basically have a story or you have something that resonates with somebody where they can self-identify that that's something they need in their life, instead of feeling bad and wrong, right? We see it all the time on the internet. We're like, hey, look, you need to lose 10 pounds or you're doing it wrong, and all this dogmacy, right? But it creates this like negative experience, backs people into a corner. They feel bad and wrong and they go do it, and then it sets them up to fail. And I'm like, hey, listen, like, if this is you and this identifies you, like, I get it. I struggled with bulimia for 12 years. Like, I get it. And like, this is where it came from and how it affected my life. And then they're like, wow, I can totally identify with that. I'm not bulimic, but like, I get obsessed about fitness and I'm orthorexic and it affects my marriage and blah, 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 blah. And then safety comes from when we build that relationship. So I go live or I share these things and I give multiple touch points of like, hey, look, I'm still living that way and this is my story and this is where it's going. And they start to trying to trust themselves, and accountability comes, and they join a program, they sign up for an email list, they add you as a friend on Facebook, they make a commitment to go to the gym or sign up for an Ironman. But it creates long-lasting success because it's somebody self-identifying and stepping into it versus us trying to force somebody into it or make them feel bad and wrong and shame them or, scarcity them into it. And so, underneath everything is all of those things. And so for me and for you and for anybody, I look at how I can keep those three things going in my life. And so like for me, my permission and safety comes from having people in my life that love me for who I am and don't let me have shame and don't let me have fault and blame and guilt. And my accountability comes by sharing it to the entire world, because that's the only thing powerful enough to keep me out of my own way. And so I just felt like that was an important distinction to kind of toss on the fire there.
No, very, very, very powerful. How do you position yourself? How do you know what you should tell the story that is going to resonate with people? Kind of the big milestones in there. I mean, there's a lot for you. And when you're consulting with people, like, how do you figure out what they should be sharing and what they shouldn't be, specifically in kind of like an elevator speech of kind of positioning themselves to get in front of the people that they want?
Yeah, so this is interesting. So talking personally for like anybody listening, for me, one of the mistakes I made in the beginning is in the beginning would go live and share my story for other people. And it was this form of like getting external validation and things like that. And I had this massive shift, and I realized that I was actually just sharing my story for myself. And it took all the pressure away. And so for me, when I work with companies, when I work with people, the first thing is that understand that like, you're not really doing this for anybody else, because you're not out here to convince people or try to coerce them into doing something. You're there to, and I use this analogy, you're there to be a lighthouse in a dark storm, like this constant shining light where you are on your space and on your rock, and you share your truth, you share your story, and people resonate with it and they come to you to get through the storm, not you go try to make them turn their boat or whatever. Like, they have to choose you. And so when you are talking about your story, you have to make sure that you're talking about your story from a space of your truth, not what you think people want to hear or how you want to position it, but like what it really, really is. And like for you, again, examples, like if you were to go live and you were to tell people like about all your workouts, a lot of people will be like, oh, I'm working out every day because I want to show you what it's like to not have back doors. It's like, no, you're not. You're working out every day because you closed your back doors. Talk about your experience and your story, because what is true for you and what lands for you is going to help other people self-identify it. And so this happens with brands, with businesses, with consultants, with anybody, with personalities and influencers. Like you see it at the top, like Lululemon. You can't name me one executive in Lululemon, not one. Nobody can, because the executives don't matter in Lululemon. They use brand ambassadors, but when they work with these ambassadors, the ambassadors get to share their truth in their lane. They get to share their messaging, why they choose that, how it makes them feel as a mother, how it makes them look as a yoga teacher, how it makes them look as a gym owner, in their truth. And then Lululemon just uses that to create that lighthouse for people to identify with. You look at the best influencers, you look at like Tony Robbins, you look at Gary Vaynerchuk, you look at, all these people, there's one commonality. They're owning their truth and like their space, and they're sharing it, and other people are self-identifying and coming in. So the most important thing is that from a congruency perspective, that whatever story you're telling, that you're telling the story from a space of like, this is ours, and owning it so it's congruent all the way through. And then that is there for people to self-identify with. And the mistake I see people making all the time is they tell stories to position it for other people. That's called manipulation. That's all that is. It's just another form of manipulation. So somebody can see you a certain way or associate a certain thing with you or have an experience because of that. And that's where it gets cloudy and murky and incongruent and not trustworthy and doesn't work, because it's not really the truth.
So where does credibility fill into that then? So because the thing, a lot of those people are trying to say, hey, I so there's personal stories in there, but then there's other things that you've gone through. So like you tell your personal story, but then you say New York Times bestseller. So like, so where's the credibility side of that story come in?
So there isn't. I say New York Times bestseller because of my ego. There's no credibility there. That's mine. Like that's me chasing external validation in this current moment. And people would be like, wow. And I'm like, and it means nothing. I still haven't celebrated it because I don't believe it to be true because I still don't think I'm good enough. And that's the work I do every single day. And so like, like it makes people uncomfortable with how much I own this, but it's the only thing that keeps me comfortable, if that makes sense. And so like I just gave a keynote in Austin at Ryan Moran's event, Brand Builder Summit. Ryan's one of my best friends, 750 people in the audience. And I'm sitting up there, Ezra Firestone, Catherine Levy, Josh Bazzoni, $600, $800 million companies, all these things. And I'm like the Wizard of Oz behind the scenes. And they're like, here's this keynote. I walk up and I'm like, I'm not giving you a keynote. I'm like, I rehearsed this whole thing and it's massively inauthentic and incongruent. And I don't think it's even aligned to what I teach you. So I'm going to do a user generated keynote instead. So shout all your questions to me right now about business and marketing. And I literally took out a piece of paper on stage and I wrote them down and I said, great, here we go. And I gave a 1 hour talk based on what they had sent me. And I told them that I was only doing that because it was easy for me to stand up there and be like, I've built this $1 billion company. I scaled this marketing campaign 10x. I've done this and this and this. And I was like, but what's hard for me is standing up here and solving your challenges from a space of actually caring and not having an ego around it. So give it all to me and let me do it. So I literally do this like every single day. And I think the only credibility humans need is that they are congruent with head, heart, and stomach. And like when I look at decisions that I make, purchasing decisions I make, relationship decisions that I make, friendships decisions, I base all of those based on how I feel with that person, not because they are so credible or they make billions of dollars or they've done all of this stuff. I base it on my gut. I'm like, can I trust this person? Is it congruent? And those decisions always work out to be the best business partnerships, the best business deals, the best purchases that I've ever made because it's all congruently aligned.
So I once was on a podcast and someone says, what's your favorite business stat to look at or something on like your like a P&L or something like that. And I go, well, I'm going to give you an answer that you probably are not expecting. It sounds like it's very similar to yours. I said, my gut. And they were like, what? And I was like, I don't need some stupid number to tell me that my business is doing good or bad. I know that number. There might be some numbers that are a little misleading. There might be you might get one customer that's an outlier that makes those numbers go big. But if you were smart about this, if you have your gut in there, where that is. So I appreciate that.
1,000%. And for me, I figured out that I was really good about making gut decisions, but sometimes my gut decisions would be a little misaligned in my head. And I would have this like incongruency and I would have this fight. And so for me, I realized that the best truth for me is the congruency that comes from like my head, my heart, and my stomach. Like I trust my gut, but then I look at it, I'm like, okay, my gut's telling me it's good. I'm like, but is this like part of my mission and vision? Like, is this going to help me have a bigger impact? Is this going to help me be a better husband, a better father, a better, so-and-so? And then I'm like, okay, so my gut feels like it is, my heart feels like it is, my head. Like, can I actually do this? Like, is there space, time, capacity, energy? And then I'm like, no. And I'm like, oh, shit, it's not 3 out of 3. I can't do it. Or I'm like, yes, then I go full force. And I make sure that I don't have any back doors because if it's not fully aligned, the second some resistance comes up, I'm going to be like, I'm out. I tossed it. I'm done. I'm not doing that thing. I'm not doing it anymore. And so I try to constantly keep that there. And for me, it's that whole thing. You nailed it. Like the gut is the best measurement. That congruency for you. Our bodies are the best doctors ever. We say it in food, right? We're like, if you eat something and you don't feel good, don't eat it again. If you eat something and you feel amazing, eat more of it. When you are making decisions, when you are in relationships, when you're in your business, in your personal life, and in your stuff, if something doesn't feel good, you should probably take a look at it and pay attention because your check engine light is on. And if you keep operating at that space, it was going to break and explode and your car will break down. Except when we don't do it mentally, it ends up in psychosis, depression, anxiety, hospitalization, quitting jobs, breaking relationships, self-sabotaging money, binge eating, quitting the gym, and all of those pieces. So we need to be very, very present and connected with ourselves and basically live through that kind of, like gut. Like for me, I don't know what to name all 3 of them, but there's just 3 of them for me. Like for me, that was the biggest thing is that I just made sure the head, the heart, and the gut all worked simultaneously together, congruently.
The Bryant way. I don't know. I mean, that's so
Yeah,
cheesy.
the Brian way, right?
The
The
Bryant.
caveman way, whatever it is. Like that's just what it is, and I love that thing for you, right? But like for me, I know you've only been able to work out every single day because your gut trusts your ability, your heart believes it to be true, and your head justifies that you can fit the time in every day. So you have all three pieces of ammunition required to do it every day.
Couple of maybe quick answer questions.
Yeah.
When you write a book, do you make money on it?
I wish. So let me just dispel this whole myth. I'm going to tell everybody right now. My book cover price was $34.95. I had a 10% royalty of that split with a co-author. So that means that $3.40 split in two, whatever that is, 170, $1.70 per copy. It took 11 months to write the book, cost me about $14,000 in ingredients and recipes, about $12,000 in camera equipment. And so I took no advance. And so from the time I started writing the book to the time I stopped getting big checks was about 2.5 years. And it equated to me having the equivalent salary of a manager at Starbucks and working about an extra 20 hours a week than that person did.
So it was like 60K, 40K.
Total? No, like it was over 2 years. Like 65K a year is what it basically averaged out to be for the equivalent of working 55 hours a week was what I basically did the math after the book tour, the expenses, the interviews, the planning. And so books should be a labor of love. And if you do them, and the reason that it was successful is because I wasn't trying to make money. I just wanted to write a book. And so I did. And but it was a harder process than I ever thought. And it's why there was only one book for me.
I signed a book deal recently myself, and maybe I shouldn't say this. My publisher said, "I hope you have another way to make money on this. Not that the book's not going to sell, but books don't make money, right?" Yeah. And so I'm clearly have a business that I've been doing for a long time, and now I'm trying to do these other things as well with it. It's really interesting, though, kind of what you're saying, and I'm going to lead towards this next part. But a lot of things that books can provide are really nice keynote speeches and checks from that. So is that kind of the go-to for you, or was the go-to on that? Or
I've never used my book for a keynote because my book's a cookbook.
Okay.
So,
but you use the personal brand at least, which is kind of a book in itself. Yeah.
Yeah. So I use the story of like how I wrote the book to give the keynotes that I give because it's all about authentic, ethical marketing. And that book and that book plan that I referenced, that 9-month strategy that I made, the entire thing was built on one-on-one relationships at scale, and that's what made it successful. So that's what I talk about and teach clients and things like that for now as well. And I think everybody, if you ever have a book in you, if you have something you want to share, I think everybody should write the book, and you just figure out what the best way for you to disseminate is. If it's traditional publishing, or you use, like my buddy Tucker Max has a company called Scribe Media, they help you outline it, you write it yourself, or you can publish on his Amazon. But like,
is that Book in a Box?
Yeah, they just rebranded it.
Okay.
So it was Book in a Box. Now it's Scribed Media because he's doing workshops where you go to him for 2 days and they'll help you literally outline your whole book and give you a writing plan and all that stuff. So
I read his book on an airplane to Vegas once. I hope they serve beer in hell.
Yeah, it's funny because Tucker is one of the most connected, psychologically intelligent human beings I've ever met in my life. And him and I are really, really good friends. And he's probably one of the most loving and caring individuals ever. And I think Carl Jung said it, like, if you want to experience heaven, you have to have your roots touching hell. And I feel like Tucker spent the first part of his life in that connected to hell part, and now he has an amazing family and wife, and he makes a difference in this world that's like immeasurable for me, and empowering authors to share their story and helping them do it without making them financially hurt, basically. So yeah, amazing human being.
Love that. What's something that we haven't talked about that might be on your mind, or something that you want to talk about?
For me, the biggest thing, and this thing is present for me, and I shared this the other day, and I did not expect people to respond to this like it did. For me, this whole backdoor theory and concept of like setting me up so I have a container for success and success only. And if I'm left to my vices, I'm going to take them. So I eliminate them. And so I think for me, a lot of people see what I do, my family, what I get paid to speak and consulting and the companies I've worked with, like, oh, you got it all together. It's so amazing. I'm like, let me just rip the curtain off for you right now. I still wake up depressed. I still wake up with sadness and PTSD, and I still have suicidal thoughts, and I still struggle with binge eating and my weight and my body image and self-love and all of these things 24/7. And they're there. And the thing is that I don't make my feelings wrong. I allow them to live and exist, and then I choose to act instead of them, right? And I said that earlier. My belief, and I said this, and a lot of people agree with me, human beings don't change. We simply elevate our consciousness to choose. And we can choose to be committed to all the crap that we're making up about ourselves, or we can choose to be committed to our vision in spite of all of that crap. And that's the commitment isn't feeling. So there's one thing that I do probably 40 times a day. And I shared this and everybody loves it. And I call it my 60 seconds of suffering. And so I've done a lot of work. I do a lot of live videos. I share a lot of stuff. And I still run into moments where I can't get the thoughts out of my head. Like I can't show up in spite of them. And so literally now I will literally open my phone and I will set a timer for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, or 15 seconds, or 60 seconds max. That's the 60 seconds of suffering. And I say, okay, I'm going to set the timer. And when the timer goes off, I get to go do whatever, like go for a walk because I don't think I'm good enough, or make a good eating decision. But in that time, I get to be right about myself. And I literally hit go and I'm like, you know what? You aren't smart enough and you're not good enough and you'll never be able to do it. And your wife doesn't love you. And like whatever crap I'm making up about myself, I literally speak it out loud with that timer going until the timer goes off. And the second the timer goes off, I have to go do whatever it is I committed to do. And that has been monumental for me in basically like giving it the space and acknowledging its existence and then moving in spite of it. And I posted this on Instagram and Facebook the other day. I've gotten at least 1,000 DMs of people doing this in their day because I'm like, if you want, you can do it and record a video and send it to me and I'll watch it. And then I'll tell you good job and keep going. And for me, it's just a way to close that back door. It's to create like physical ownership of like these negative thoughts in our head. And I'm like, great, they want to be there. Just let them live. Like, take their power away. I'd be like, I see you, right? It's like the imposter syndrome or your doubts. Like people keep them at the front door knocking and you're like, oh, I hear him at the front door. I'm like, great, let him in, invite him in for coffee and be like, I see you. You're not going to run me anyways. And so for me, I always want people to have tools or things that they can implement in their life, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a business owner, whether you work for somebody, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, you have fitness issues, food issues, body issues, whatever. They're not issues. They're just things. They're just feelings. And I want you to be able to show up in your life and create what you want in spite of all of those things. And so just set yourself up to win. And so that has been monumental for me and a lot of other people. And so just set a timer on your phone and make an intention. As soon as I'm allowing myself to have these thoughts, at the end of it, I will do this. And don't give yourself a back door and then go do it. And it'll change how you show up and the results that you create in your life.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening to this entire episode of Zack Miller Says. It was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions or guests that you want to ask me or see be on the show, hit me up. You can just do it in the comments or email me, ZACK, that's me, at startwithhatch.com. So Zack, ZACK, at StartWithHatch.com. Now, my good friend Eric Olson is encouraging me to do these out cues, right? Usually when you're listening to these, the show just kind of ends abruptly. Why? Because it's weird and that's what anomalies do. But he really thinks that I should be upselling this bad boy, my brand new book, Anomaly, How to Finally Stand Out from the Crowd. Now, officially, the book comes out April 2nd of 2019. However, I have advanced copies, and if you want one of these bad boys, you can go to ZackMillerSays.com/Anomaly. That's ANOMALY, or just check out the link in the show notes, and you can get your advanced copy of the greatest book ever written, produced, and whatever other exciting word to describe it could be. I really appreciate you guys continuing to listen to the show, though. It means a lot to me. We've done hundreds of episodes. I really want to tell the stories of people, be very transparent in my solo episodes, my long-form interviews with people, trying to get stories that most people have not been able to get out of them. I think that's something that's super powerful and really provides great content. I love the stories that I'm telling of the people that I interview, and then I also, with these solo episodes, just really try to talk through and document what I'm currently going through. And so I appreciate you guys listening. Hey, and also one last thing, after you grab the book, like cheesy plug for the book here, after you get the book, make sure you subscribe to the show. And if you have a friend or a following that you think would also enjoy the episode, share it with them as well. Because the more people that consume this, the more lives that we together can change. Ooh, look at that. Grab a book. Thank you all. Peace.